Hello, everybody. Welcome to the sixth episode of the Unity or Death podcast. It's been kind of a wild week for me. I've gone on like Dave Smith's show and a bunch of other stuff, so kind of trying to catch back up. But I have a good friend of mine on today. We have the Mr. Shane Hazel. How you doing, my man?
Good, brother. I told you AV was going to happen here.
You had to be my first AV issue then.
Dude, I'll figure this out on my end. I'm pretty adept with StreamYard in the background, so I'll fix it. We can just keep going.
Okay, but well, for now, Mr. Black Screen Shane Hazel, how you doing today?
Man, I'm really good. I can't complain today. I could. We probably will, but you know how it is. Like, started off on a positive foot.
Right. Get all the mistakes out early and you won't have to worry about it later, right?
That's right.
But yeah, so for people who don't exactly know who you are, you're very infamous in some circles, so maybe they already do. Kind of just give me like your background and what you've been up to the last year or so.
Yeah, in the last year, I've been running for U.S. Senate. I was the spoiler down here in the state of Georgia, and did it without spending a dime on a campaign. Really, just preaching the message of liberty here on StreamYard and all that fun stuff. And I'll tell you, man, it's been a wild ride this past year. I mean, the people in the market, man, you just feel it chomping at the bit, like it knows everything's wrong right now, and it's looking for those people and those answers. And I think, it's the stock of people in this space is just climbing like a rocket right now.
I was say, yeah, it seems like the amount of people on the margins, kind of like us, are blowing up way more, and a lot of like everyone's talking about Liz Cheney right now, but nobody seems to really care about Liz Cheney. And 2005, that would have never been the case. But now, like the hot button, issue kind of people, the ones everyone talking about are like Jimmy Dore, Dave Smith, it's these margin people. My weird story that I'm on. So, yeah,
it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, it's really one of those things. As much like you're in algorithms too, right? Like you're in a repressed algorithm, and you're still making these strides, right? And I think it's the coolest thing on earth to see, this counterculture, starting to eat at the culture war, right? Like it's nibbling at the edges. I get it, but it's right there, and it is picking up speed. More and more people every day. And I mean, that's why I encourage people to maybe get in the space. If you're thinking about podcasting, do it. Go be a podcaster. You can affect somebody's life somewhere, and that's all we need. We need one person.
Right. And that's definitely like, I always preach that libertarians need to start doing libertarian things. And by like all means available, not every means necessary, because that implies a lot of gross things, but by all means available, like whether it be a podcast, whether it be activism, whether it be running like you did, whether it be, what Dan Berman's doing, smuggling insulin across the board. Like, so
right. He's a hero, man.
Yeah.
That guy's a hero to people. Like he's bringing them life-saving drugs, and he's a criminal for it. It's amazing.
And he doesn't even try to hide it. There's no mystery. He tags Bernie Sanders when he does it.
No. I'll tell you what, man, it was crossed my mind. And I know this is probably not a subject you intended to even talk about, but man, I'll tell you right now, like starting a church there's this great book that some of my listeners turned me on to the other day. It's the Key to Immortality, or the Immortality Key, right? I don't know if you've ever read it.
I think Vin Armani or something like that brought that up once.
Yeah. It's really good, but it's like one of those things where you're like, hey man, I don't agree with this belief system anymore, and I want to start my own belief system, and it doesn't involve like a real, it's not a religion that is talked about or any of that kind of stuff, but around like psilocybin and cannabis and nature, basically, where people get to commune and knock all that calcified nonsense off of their pineal gland. Like, hey, I want to connect people spiritually, man. Like that, like if we can do that culturally, form our own damn church or whatever the belief system is, like we know for a fact, like, hey man, that's kind of like rule one here in the US. You don't fuck with people's beliefs, right? Like that's, man, I don't know. I'm jazzed up, man. I am excited about it.
No, that's awesome. That's the kind of stuff I talk about all the time, because I'm big on agorism of everybody like wants to fight over Hollywood or fight over these mega churches, like mainstream Christianity. They want to fight over the political parties. They want to take their, like all this stuff, to where I always preach, like, just go make your own. Like, obviously, they're going to try to destroy it. They're going to try to stop it. They're going to deplatform, censor, ban, pull your permit. Like, but that seems to be the effective way forward. And obviously, you did that even like with your campaign and stuff of like, you chose not to participate in their systems. You just made your own thing and went for it.
Yeah. And I mean, you garner 115,000 votes on no budget in a U.S. Senate race. That's crazy, right? Like, nobody, like, we got blackballed by media and all that kind of stuff. It's like, if you want something bad enough, you'll go damn do it. Get off your ass, take some initiative, start small. You're not going to be the biggest thing in the universe. And that's good. Like, I'll tell you what, it's like, to have people fall in love with the idea that they can serve their local community, right? Not be like this rock star out there. Like, be a rock star in your own community, man. Like, go introduce people to psilocybin and cannabis, and go introduce people to a better life in terms of being your own sovereign type of being. Like, share that power. And like that, I'll tell you what, I think that's where, I mean, to be willing to die for a message of your own personal sovereignty, man. That's how some pretty big names in history have stuck around. You know what I mean?
Right. And like you never know when the moment's going to hit. Cause like, I don't know. I guess this is partly me asking you, but did you really know that Georgia was going to become what Georgia did? What, like, was there any like inkling, or did you kind of like trip and fall into the most important pocket bubble of the most important election of the bubble? Like,
Yeah, no, it was a little more intentional, that, man. I've been paying attention to politics for too fucking long, right? Like, it's been way too long. But I knew going into this, it was going to be a big election. I know I've really messed up some careers. Like, I've messed up Purdue's, but before that, I messed up this guy who was my U.S. representative, Rob Woodall, and a lot of people don't know that story. And as I ran as a Republican in a very close Democrat-Republican setting down here, it was the Georgia 7th district. To point out the weaknesses of a Republican at the time, who I was still running as a Republican in 2018, and the people out there that were sick of it, that wanted something better, that wanted people that respected their rights and wanted to have the fight, I'm not going to vote for that guy anymore. And so what happens? That guy says, oh, you know what? I can't win anymore. He's gone. So, to know kind of where I messed up the first time around, what my ROI was on the first time around, and to go and magnify and try some things. And I was my own campaign manager this time, right? Like, it was unfiltered. There's no excuses. Go do whatever the hell you want to do, what you see fit. And that, I'll tell you what, man, I struck some proverbial gold in terms of creating an incident where the nation had to pay attention, right? It had to pay attention to a guy down here. And so we also had, the compound effect of having a jungle primary. And having a jungle primary at the same time, you've got a regular U.S. Senate election. And jungle primary, for you guys, we had both Senate seats on the line this time around. Johnny Isakson, the U.S. Senator down here, said, I can't continue to go on. I'm sick and I'm dying, and I got to leave office. So it opened it up to anybody who wanted to be on a ballot. So I was like, oh, dude, this is going to get really crazy really quick. And if you can get a name out there, and then along comes COVID, right? Like, and I shouldn't say COVID. I should say, here comes tyranny. And from that point,
the giant lockdown.
Yeah. From that point, I was the only candidate that was doing a podcast, right? I was the only U.S. Senate candidate doing a podcast. And I think that's just what happened, man. It was just so much content at some point, whether they're one, issue voter or they like the entire message and they become a fan, like, you're undeniably affecting politics down here. And I was lucky to enter the Libertarian Party when I did. I was lucky to come in with a message, and I didn't nominate myself. The Libertarian Party nominated me to go up there and run, and man, just tickled to death to be able to do it the way we did it.
Yeah, I mean, it caused like a national shitstorm, because you're right, of like, people, whether they realize it or not, and even if they have like annoying public opinions, everyone's kind of just desperate for something, anything, like any any event or big change happening, because we've been on this slow, like molasses slide towards tyranny, with a couple more, COVID lockdowns being a speed up. But in general, like since George W. Bush, nothing's really changed. Like we haven't had like a lot of fresh faces, whatever. Like Trump had a moment in the very beginning where people were kind of like, maybe this is different. And then it just became more the same again. And obviously also like AOC and Bernie Sanders before they sold out, like people are looking for that anywhere. And whether it be like the speech I gave, like your Senate race, like Spike Cohen and what he's doing, and like Maj Touré, like when an average person runs into people like our little weird bubble that we're building here, and we're so outside of what they're normally experiencing when it comes to politics and like what's acceptable, they get excited and it starts making things move. And I've definitely seen kind of like a lot of people personally that were totally checked out of like electoralism or whatever. And like a libertarian will never matter anywhere until Shane Hazel. And then they're like, oh, hang on, there might be, a way to wiggle still. Like, this whole Dave Smith, Mises Costas thing might actually go somewhere, or like maybe a different path or angle. And it's a phrase I say all the time of like lead, follow, or get out of the way. So like if you don't see someone doing something, go for it. And you never know how far you're going to run with it.
Yeah, I know. And I always tell people, liberty is a verb, man. You got to be involved and you got to do it. And the thing is, a lot of times what some people get hung up around is the way other people do it. And it's like, man, and unless you're fucking Nick Sarwark or somebody, that's a government plant anyway, it's like, I don't give a damn the way you liberty. Go out and do something, man. Like the couch commando and the keyboard warriors out there that aren't doing shit except for posting on Twitter, like, man, go do something. Come back and be a creator, a net positive versus a net, consumer, right? Like go out and do that kind of stuff. And I think it's, another message where a lot of people get hung up with wins in, political office. And I think it's completely the wrong way to look at the culture war that we're fighting. And it's how many people can you peel off? How many people can we and what statistic is it that, kind of gets to that point of, hey, no, you know what? There's enough people that agree on the basics out here in terms of principles where we don't hurt people, we don't take their stuff. Like we've got enough to make a stand now, and they can't ignore it. We're armed to the fucking teeth. We're fire. They don't have the truth on their side, and we can point to where they're, really, and not being hyperbolic or gaslighting. They are committing acts of war against peaceful people. If I can pull people off it with a campaign, great. If I can pull, this is going to get quoted by all the perverts out there. If I can pull people off with if I can peel people off, with a campaign or a podcast or a column or whatever the case, cool, man. Go do whatever you want. And if you got to do it inside the Republican Party, I don't care either. Like I don't care how people liberty. Go do it. Peel people off. Bring them to the idea and at least show them the idea of liberty. You might get rejected, but at the same time, you might have 4 people that are standing around listening to the conversation that go.
And like the team thing, because obviously that's the big thing I advocate is like, I don't care if you call yourself BLM or a libertarian or like whatever I don't care. It's what you're fighting for. That also, like a lot of people forget, that also applies to the political parties. Like I genuinely do not care what letter is in front of your name. It's like what you are about. So I see a lot of people that are like, oh, these Republicarians or whatever, like they'll talk about like Thomas Matthey or something. I'm like, I don't care. I don't like, because a lot of times like they're hated by their own party anyway. So, whatever, it doesn't matter to me.
And if you can work with somebody on an issue, work with them on that issue. Right, you at least show you're human. You get to show some humanity, and I'll tell you what, man, that's in short supply. People love humanity these days. Between liberty and humanity and humbleness, like man, like hard work too. Like people, there are people that are in these niches that are going, we need a lot more of this stuff.
And I see that like across the spectrum. And obviously me being my whole thing is the unity thing. And I went on Dave Smith yesterday, and a lot of people were kind of just saying like, why would you ever ally with Marxists on anything, or progressives or Democrats or Republicans? Like, why would you compromise on your values? And I'm kind of curious of like how you would answer that. Cause I've answered it a million different ways, but like what if somebody came up to you and was like, well, we can end qualified immunity. Maybe we'd have to fight for it really hard in this state or something. But that means that we have to work with like like absolute like Stalinist or something like that, and somebody say, I don't want to do that, how would you kind of sell that to them?
Yeah, I mean, qualified immunity for maybe people that haven't heard the term, I imagine in these circles you have. Maybe you're new to these circles. Who knows? Qualified immunity is the legal practice of a two-tier justice system for government officials, mostly guys who wear badges, right? So what happens is these guys can go out and operate without the threat of severe penalty for the same, very heinous crimes that we commit, whether it's theft through, civil asset forfeiture or, murder, for God's sakes, or whatever else. It's the idea that I am, I guess, mature enough to understand that I don't care who it is or what subject it is. If the idea is always bigger than the person to begin with, the idea that we can stop pointing some guns at peaceful people, right? Like, I'm all about that. To put the fear back in government, I'm all about that. They should be extremely afraid. Like, I mean, think about it in terms of a corporation or a mom and pop or whatever out there that actually pays attention to the people, their customers. If the government paid attention to their customers like Chick-fil-A pays attention to their customers, can you imagine the damn difference? Can you imagine being able to take that money and go, I'm sorry, guys, like, I'm not giving you my money anymore. I don't agree with what you're doing. I don't believe in your belief system. Man, it's like, that's what it's got to be. And if I can work, I don't care who it is, if I can get these things done where people in the government are reactive to how we are and what we want, man, we're in a way better situation than we are now. Because right now, you can just tell they don't give a damn about what we want and what we're saying.
Right. Yeah, like the ATF having National Puppy Day, or the CIA like woke commercials, like they're laughing in our face. They don't care. They're not afraid at all. And you see these people where somehow their threat analysis is so screwed up that they'll consider groups like BLM or anti-fascist or Proud Boys or like whatever on the other side, or me, as equal to a threat as the federal government. And like I try to talk to these people and like put my brain into that, and I just can't do it, because it's not even the same universe as each other, like I cannot breathe without having an interaction with the federal government. But like if you were in like West Virginia on a mountain and didn't have television, you might not even know there was a BLM movement. But a game warden might come up to your house and like, harass you over like a tag you don't have or something. So it's like the priorities are just so screwed up.
Yeah.
But yeah, like to what you were saying though, definitely of like getting out there. I keep bringing this up all the time, but Spike Cohen went down to West Virginia and met with an entire BLM organization and just sat down and talked to them. And like Jafari Jones, he's my friend. He runs that now. We're like real close now because of stuff Spike was doing, of just going into these communities and being like, hey, all the things you care about, hey, there's a third party that cares about this, that we're doing all of this. We're running around. We care about the no-knock raids. We care about qualified immunity, civil after that forfeiture. We want like defund the police to a degree. Like, and that entire chapter of BLM voted for Jo Jorgensen. And like, she wasn't even the best candidate in the world. And Spike still got her to do that in the middle of the Biden Trump wars, which was like crazy. So if he can do that, like what do you think, like, what would you say to like the average libertarian person that might be doing something like I am, of going to like events or out, like how would you attack getting more people on board with this? And some more like concrete examples. It takes a second, right? Like it just takes some action. Like human action is a big thing. And it's a big thing for a reason, it's not like a hashtag or a slogan. It's like, hey, like this is inspired because somebody took some initiative, got off their ass, and they did something. I mean, you were on the steps, where was it, Michigan? Yeah, I was in the Lansing Capitol. Yeah, man, like that's my home state. I saw you up there, and I saw what you were wearing, and I saw my buddy Diego's patch on your chest with, I think it was the Redneck Patch.
Yeah, man. I
So
was
you
just like,
you know Diego then? That's crazy.
dude, he's a great friend of mine, man. And
I'm
that
a-
guy is all over the United States, just crushing it, right? And so, I mean, I love that guy to death. And like, I saw it, and I'm sending it to him, probably like a billion other people. I was like, did you see this? My home state, Michigan, and that's here we are, right? Like, what was that like? I don't know how many months ago. It was
4
still
months ago.
cold. Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
don't even
mean,
know.
yeah, and I was just like, wow, man, this is incredible. It takes action. It takes a yearning. It can't just be like a hobby, right? Like you gotta you gotta live, eat, and breathe whatever you want to do for your passion, right? And I talk about this stuff all the time. Is passion creates, if you can foster passion, you can create genius, and genius is a lift humankind. Foster your passion, man. Like if this is your thing, going out to places like Lansing and getting on the steps and giving it to them, it probably made you a little bit nervous. It probably gave you some attention that you didn't want in terms of hate mail and everything else. Imagine there are people within your family that were like, man, I can't do this with this guy. And like, I get that, man. Like, I've been there, and you gotta be that person that believes ideas are bigger than people for liberty and freedom, man. And I mean, if you believe that, there's nothing you can't do. There's nothing you won't do. And I think the beautiful thing is we're asking for peace, man. As vets and everything else, like, we've seen this bullshit. And when you see it overseas, and you're like, oh my God, they're doing the same stuff here. Like, guys, stop, pay attention for just half a second. I got to tell you, the last thing you guys want to do is, other each other, dehumanize each other, and possibly talk about ever going kinetic with each other. It's insane.
Yeah, it's always wild to me of like, obviously, like, I'm the Boogaloo boy. Like, the whole thing is like a second civil conflict of everything's going to go sideways. That's the meme,
Sure.
But outside of that, like, people will come to me and they'll be like, oh, don't trust him. He's trying to start a second civil war or something like that. But then I'll watch like the average American talk to each other, and I'll see on like Facebook of like friends and family of like, oh, I hope those protesters block my car one time. I'll run them over. Or I hope those fascists come to my town. We'll show them. And I watch people talk like this. And I'm not a vet, but I come from a very extensive like military family of like almost every single person in my family was in the military to some degree, one way or another. And I watched that and I start getting real nervous and that's the whole reason of me doing this unity stuff is I'm like, people are already shooting at each other, and
yeah,
we're getting to the point now where there is a lot of people that are open to the unity stuff, but there's also people that we've gotten so far down to this where it's almost gotten to a Mexican standoff where it's like, well, you put your gun down first, and then I'll put my gun down. Until then, we can't talk to each other. And definitely as libertarians, like I'd like to get your take on this. I've always seen us as kind of the moderators, like the middle ground between like the left and right of like, hey, like pot smoking hippie. Yeah, you have the parents.
No, I swear to God, we're standing between children. We are standing between children. I mean, I have children, so I kind of feel like an expert on fights, right? Like, and it's just like, stop. Just stop and pause for a second, usually. And most of the time, what I'm as a parent, what I have to do is I have to stop and pause myself because, if you're doing things out of anger and frustration and like you're seeing red, you need to stop for a minute because you can like, listen, that is a bad area to go in and be that person. But what I'm saying is basically, after you have a second, you reflect and you can go up to these, mental children, right? Like that are squabbling over events or people and not ideas. Like you're dealing with people who are retarded mentally. And I don't mean that in a, like you're somehow never going to be a whole person. What I'm saying is the murder cult that is out there, this aristocratic combination that indoctrinated you, in mandatory camps since you were 5 years old, right? Like they've never been exposed to these ideas. They've never seen it. And you've got to have a level of patience with you and humanity with you to go, hey, listen, there's a better way, you guys, right? If you can be that guy that's, saying, hey man, there's some better ways to do some stuff in a calm, rational, cool way, man, the response, that's part of the secret to how I guess maybe kids have made me better at this, right? It's like, let's talk about this as calm, rational people. I know you're mentally undeveloped, just like my children, right? You're not quite there. It's because you haven't been exposed to the ideas. You don't know the life hacks. I don't know if this is a damn simulation. Your AI needs updating. You know what I mean? And so instead of having all these little bots run around that are binary, let's introduce a real new string of code to them that just it's an infinite string of code, right? Like that's how I look at things. Is it's just like, we got better ways. Let me update your code a little bit. Here, take this. Do something better.
Right. And like it's like I talked about like the stagnation. I even feel like that, like with technology, we haven't caught up to the reality that we have the internet at all.
Right.
Like our culture and the way we handle things and everything is not built around the fact that I have literally all the information on the entire planet that I'd ever want to touch staring me in my pocket at any time. And you're right. It seems like we're stuck in like this weird like binary processing system, and we need to like update from the first Mac, because I feel like that's culturally where we are on a lot of things, to where we're arguing about left and right still. I don't even think left and right really exists anymore. Like it's so surreal that like Richard Spencer and Ron Paul are considered on the same side as like Jimmy Dore and Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So, what?
Yeah, that's not my continuum. Like my continuum is liberty, and I got tyranny on one side, despots and tyranny, and guess what? All of you guys that are part of the Republican and the Democrat, like you guys are over there on that despotic side, man. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I know that's not something you want to hear, but hey, listen, I was there once. Let me show you how I made the pilgrimage over here to like anarcho-capitalist, right? Like just it's not all that. Well, it is hard. It is hard to take some pills. Some of them are big, like somebody, just for example, like somebody was saying I should, get in touch with like the guys over at Black Rifle Coffee, like Drinking Bros, their podcast, and get in touch with the Dakota Meyer and his podcast. And, I said, I don't know if they're ready, man. Like, I don't know if they're ready to have that conversation about how the Constitution was a coup, right? Like that's one of the big last pills that I remember taking, and it was super hard to take, man. It was one of those things where, Lysander Spooner, thank God he woke me up a little bit, but it's like, Jesus Christ, like, wow.
Yeah, that's actually one of the two things I definitely wanted to talk about with you, because it's something as huge as a like point of history that it was. The Federalist, Anti-Federalist debates, and like George Mason standing at the ratification saying this is all bullshit and you guys are going to ruin the country. Like that is like a paragraph in our history books, if it's even included at all. Usually they're like,
not anymore.
Yeah, usually they're like, oh, we did the Articles of Confederations and then it didn't work, and then we signed the Constitution and everything was great. And it's like, oh, wait, that's like 25, 30 years of like development and debates and arguments over ideas that we just don't talk about. And I know you're like, maybe expert isn't the right term, but compared to the average person, even knowing anything about it makes you an expert. I kind of wanted like a deeper take on all of the anti-federalists and kind of everything that went on in that period, and how America was betrayed. It was killed at its birth, essentially, by this.
Yeah, I mean, the plans to incorporate, right, is like the difference between slaves and subjects and citizens and sovereigns, right? Like, we had this idea coming over here, a lot of people, that we were going to be our own sovereigns. We were going to carve out a little piece of land. We were going to be self-sufficient. We were going to be sovereigns. And, the murder cult, when they took over education, in the late 1800s with Thorndike, Dewey, Van Hoof, and all the Fabian socialists that brought it over from Prussia, and got Carnegie and Ford to put money into these things, right? It was one of those things where that beginning process where they left out the parts of history that really, really mattered. I mean, we didn't fight an empire. You don't fight an empire with craftsmen and farmers to sit there and go, well, you know what? Maybe we do need a centralized government. Just 10 years later? No, you don't do that. Like, these guys really don't even want to be associated with the state. That's why, you started having westward expansion. And they're like, it's getting a little too statey over here, right? Just in the 10 years, they were like, I'm going out to the farmland. And a lot of what happened during that time, in terms of, this back and forth was, the farmers and the craftsmen were not the aristocratic combination. They didn't have the resources. They didn't have the thugs that could go out there and, really defend their property. So a lot of them wrote under aliases, like guys on the internet with podcasts today. A lot of people are under aliases, and that's okay. But there were some out there, obviously, that didn't care. Patrick Henry, for one, and you're like, hey, these people, they penned, I don't know how many are, like I think it's like 80 plus, right? Like 80 plus documents for the anti-federalists in the cases against being a constitutional republic versus like centralizing authority. And you're deprived of that knowledge on purpose because it doesn't further the murder cult's agenda, and that is that the centralized part of this government was brought about by very wealthy people that bullied and forced the rest of the nation into a centralized authority. Basically the king again, your House of Lords, your House of Commons, and the royal court. Complete oligarchy.
Yeah, pretty much. And like, I mean, if you want kind of a mind blow to anybody who's not familiar with his work, just look up some of George Mason's quotes. Yeah. And the dude was a prophet. It's insane how much he nails it. Like one of my favorite is like if he mentioned that if you allow like the Senate to be operated the way it does, senators will become residents of the federal town and no longer residents of their state. And it's like, wow, who saw that coming? This was before it was even signed. He was telling them like, this is what's going to happen. And
this is over 244 years ago. Right, they were saying this kind of thing. Like, if you guys want to blow your mind, go read the Anti-Federalists. And if you're interested, I read. I think I'm up to about the 30th of the 80 plus papers, and I do commentary on it. It's awesome. Like, you want to talk about prophets? Like, you read these guys and you sit there and go, they don't teach us why. Like, who are these guys? Who's Brutus? Who's a farmer? Who's Patrick Henry? Who are these people? Right, like. Man, you never hear about them because they were exactly right, man. And oh god, they are
Spooner and Voltairine and like all the early like American anarchists too. Like, yeah. Perfect. Like, I mean, and it's so funny to me that the narrative that's spun to people is that we gave up on the Articles of Confederation to stop a civil war, and then you flip the page in the history book and it's the American Civil War, and it's like. Like, wait, I thought the whole point is why we needed a centralized authority is the states would all kill each other without it. And then also like there's other little details that are left out of it that happened under the Constitution, like Michigan and Ohio almost getting into war with each other. Everything that went on with like the Mormons out in Utah and stuff where was a civil war. And it's like, oh, I thought this was supposed to stop all this big, centralized like authority in Washington, D.C. And that's why we couldn't have all the states be sovereign. And it's surreal that like they get away with it. I mean,
how many years into George Washington's presidency did we have the Whiskey Rebellion? Right? You're just like, damn, guys, like, this is ridiculous. Like, these guys aren't down with your new centralized government. I mean, talking about taxes and everything else in terms of like, I think we're, into the early 30s with the Anti-Federalists. You're like, dude, if we give these guys the ability to tax us, they're going to tax us at both levels. And oh, by the way, at the end of the day, the federal government is going to tell these people basically what they can and what they can't tax. It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like when I always say that, like, obviously running in anarchist circles and being around a bunch of Spooner fans and stuff like that, if you ever like kind of idolize the founding fathers, this is what gets brought up. But I always kind of retort back of like, when I say the founding fathers, I mean like some drunk like South Carolina farmer in the swamps taking shots. Right. Like that's my founding fathers. Because a lot of those guys, like you said, they either ran west or they immediately turned on the government. And there's tiny pockets of just like little historical footnotes that you can dig up of gunfights between like the Constitutional Army and random farmers and stuff like that long after the English were kicked out. Almost all going all the way up to like the War of 1812. Like there was people that were defecting and joining like the Native Americans to fight the United States government that just 10, 15 years ago were you know, fighting the redcoats and talking about freedom and liberty.
It's such a glossed over, glittery, you know. I just, you know, it's one of the first things that went to what is it in Orwell, the newspeak, right? Like when you know, the double talk and newspeak and all that kind of stuff. When you're looking at that, those were the first casualties. The first casualty of any war is the truth. And so when you see what happened with this coup inside of America, which is, you know, the Constitution. Boy, I mean, what an amazing part of history to not talk about. I mean, seriously, the lead up to that, the way it came about is it's not honest at all, which means, well, if it's not honest, there's probably a reason why it's not honest, and that is to, you know, to put forth, you know, these ridiculously, you know, progressive, tyrannical, despotic ideas of centralization of power. And it's, I mean, when you start talking about the land of the free in that way, man, it all kind of falls apart. The quote unquote heroes, right? The George Washingtons, the Abraham Lincolns, the Madisons, the Hamiltons, who they've tried to rewrite now. You're just like, oh my, like, you guys are nuts. You guys are absolutely psychopathic when it comes to, you know, your power in the present. It's nuts.
Yeah, it's all been glossed over. It's all been bleached. There's so many like little wars and stuff like that. And obviously we don't even have to, you know, we can segue into the other thing I wanted to talk to you about with this. A lot of the imperialism of the United States from very early, like people have this like idea of like, oh, we were minding our own business until Woodrow Wilson got us into the World War I, and it's been downhill ever since. And it's like,
nah.
No,
y'all know about Tripoli. You know about the Spanish Wars. You know about like all of these things. I mean being a Marine, man. Like, I mean, they teach you your history.
It's in your song. It's in the song.
Not only is it in the song, but you spent a lot of time learning, you know, Marine Corps history from the very beginning, right? It's like, hey, man, we got a problem over here in the in the, you know, Mediterranean Sea, and we're going to solve that shit. We're going to put together a group of dudes, put them on some boats, call them Marines, and have them slit throats. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, the Marines been around, you know, I guess longer than America's been around. And it's a story. It's the history of America. Oh God, who was I reading? I think it must have been Gatto. I owe a lot to that guy, but when he talked about, you know, the history of civilizations, man, ours is bathed in blood. Most of history is bathed in blood. And you look at the pockets that aren't, and you're like, well, why not? Why aren't these people bathed in blood like the rest of them? And it's because they had a propensity and a principle of peace. Like they're like, yeah, we're not getting into this kind of stuff because it doesn't do our people any good to go out there and fight these bloody wars and have conflicts. Is mind your business, trade with all in Philadelphia and good, you know, humankind. And when it comes to violence, absolutely refuse. Stay away from it and work with who you can, and, you know, leave the situations where you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, definitely it comes from my backstory a little bit too, because I've brought up a few times, but I have a direct Irish lineage, like my family right off the boat in New York and stuff like that. And there was people in like my family lineage and stuff that was part of the St. Patrick's Battalion fighting the United States in Mexico. Like, and I tell people that all the time of like, do you know that there's a Mexican holiday for Irish people? And they're like, what do you mean? And it's like, yeah, because a bunch of Irish people were like, this United States thing's kind of tyrannical. It reminds me a lot of Great Britain. I'm going to go join with the Mexicans and fight the U.S. military. And it's
Crazy.
like, yeah, that's a thing that happened. And you'll never hear about that.
No, you definitely don't hear about it in boot camp.
Right. Well, yeah, but there's probably, you know, glorifying the enemy in boot camp is probably the worst possible thing you could do.
Yeah, there's none of that. No, man. Go ahead.
No, sorry. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's where you learn how awesome the United States is and how awesome the Marine Corps is and how we were back-to-back world champs, right? Like, you know, come on, guys. Like, this is like people that look at the world that way. I have this place in my heart where, oh, man, if I could just reach out and touch you, man, because this is not what it's supposed to be like.
Yeah, I don't know any vet really that feels that way. Like maybe some from like a trauma a little bit, like there's a little bit like reactionary trauma, but no like genuine, just like we're the bestest, goodest guys ever, and we've never heard, especially like obviously any of the Middle Eastern conflicts, like no, like that nobody comes back with that opinion.
The combat vets especially are like, yo.
Like, no.
What we call them pogues, people other than grunts, like not in a combat MOS. They're like, come here, dude. I know you sat behind the wire and feel like you need to wear your hat with all the veteran stuff on it and have the placards and all that kind of stuff plastered on your car. This is you look like a fucking clown. What are you doing? Before we go into because I want to talk to you about a lot of anti-war stuff that's going on right now and kind of all that. But I ask every single person who either is in or was in the military how they feel about this, because I thought it was the most ridiculous thing ever. How do you feel about the National Guard that were deployed to Washington, D.C. getting a combat deployment ribbon for D.C.? Please tell me how you feel about this, because my entire, like I said, my entire family military, biblical shitstorms. They were so mad about it. So it's like, yeah, I guess as a young Marine, I would have been like, what? They're getting bullshit awards, and then you take a step back as a kind of an older guy, and you're like, they're all bullshit, right? Like,
right.
It's yeah, no, I mean, I think that's where I kind of had the epiphany, about awards, right? Like the greater the award, with the V device, right, is what a lot of people, when they look at, chess, even in the military, they go, whoa, like that guy's done some stuff, right? Like that guy's been there, he's done it, he's got, especially if he's an enlisted guy, not writing his own awards. And to understand that those trinkets are, they cost a couple cents. They're probably made in China, and they are pinned to your chest for serving the murder cabal. We're not freer here in America, right? Like, if you just have to take a look at the damn National Guard that were deployed to DC, to guard our hideous government from the blowback of the American people. And it's not, that's the thing, is like, they weren't just worried about, the MAGA crowd. Like, when you have a year like we had in 2020 and cities are burning to the ground, and you've got the top cop and Biden and people across the board, the Bernie bros know that shit is rigged. The MAGA people know it's rigged.
They don't see folks like
yeah, everybody, all of them. everybody knows this fucking shit is rigged. We're in a banana republic, in a blowback, at a time where you have all these quote unquote, important people sitting at the Capitol, like the Hunger Games. Oh, they're not letting in District 11. They're not letting it in District 9. No, you can't be that close to the Capitol people. You're unclean. Go get washed, and gross, right? Like, that's the way it will be until this empire falls. And so, yeah, man, I guess, golly, I can stretch an answer out a long ways. I think the award is just complete bullshit. It's but like I said, they're all bullshit. That's kind of how I think of it.
Yeah, I figured as much. I just saw that, and I'm like I almost feel like a bribe to like to be like, good job, guys. Don't forget the poison food and the sleeping in the parking garage to defend Washington D.C. from your own people. Here's a pin.
Yeah. Well, and you might get a kick out of this, but like when I heard they were sleeping in the parking decks and people were mad, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I would have given anything at some points in my military contract to be sleeping in a parking garage in DC. Holy shit. The places I had to sleep in the whether it was Najaf or Fallujah or out on train, I don't give a damn. Some of the places that I slept and the things that I slept in, oh my God, I would have given anything in the world at that time to be in a parking deck in DC, freezing my ass off. I mean, I made the connection, and I was blasting it everywhere. Like I think it was like Facebook is when I was allowed to be on Facebook at the time. I was taking pictures of them in Saddam's palace, like sleeping on the floor and like on the nice benches and everything, right alongside like the National Guard, like sleeping below like the bus and like the expensive paintings. And I'm like, oh, this is familiar, Yep. Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. Warfare looks the same no matter where you're at. It's ugly. It's you can smell it, you can feel it. It's just It's an evil thing, man.
Yeah, and that's definitely like what kind of the last topic I want to close out on of the anti-war stuff of we're seeing. I definitely I love talking to people about this that were actually on the ground, because the way counterterrorism works and counter extremism works, if you've done it or has at least like been proximity to it, and then you're watching what's happening now here with like the DHS and everything like that, like every single person I talk to sees these connections and sees where this is going. And I kind of wanted to ask you about that, of how you feel seeing kind of like being a step away from, like how they would take the spray paint in Afghanistan to mark buildings of like, hey, this is where these people hang out. We'll monitor this building. We're like this close to that here. So like, I kind of wanted like your opinion and how that's going.
It's already here, right? Like, geofencing is a big thing for tech and government and all that kind of stuff. Like they know, like I can tell you right now, for the algorithms and everything else they're running, they know where the hot spots in America are. They really do. Like they can sit there and go, yep. And they know where it is in real time. That's what Americans need to wake up to. Like they know where the hot spots are. They know where the no-go zones are. They know where the conglomeration of these people are, all in real time. And I'll tell you, like I see it as plain as day, because being part of operations that are, they are the transition from prior to kinetic, right? Like it's the pre-warfare stuff. That's what reconnaissance guys are, like that's what we do. We provide intel back to the rest of the Marine Corps, and then obviously having cross-trained at the time with guys from USASOC in special operations to do force multiplication and do human and to do all sorts of really kind of, I don't know, sneaky as fuck type of bullshit things where you're running around lying and giving money to people and driving wedges in communities and then doing disruption at the same time, where, you can do something and have somebody else blamed for it, right? Like, oh man, that's happening all over the place. And then on top of it, you've got now the real disruption of things like energy, not only, here in the South, but up north, there was a pipeline as well that they shut down. And to think, those two areas, the Midwest and the Southeast, probably two of the most densely packed, most powerful regions in the country. And they're shutting down things like, pipelines to make, energy more expensive, to even more quickly drain the savings and everything else, the resources of the people here in the South. It's coming, man. Like the best thing you guys can say is peaceful. Keep doing what you're doing. They don't know how to handle peaceful people. They have no idea, because if you're all standing around and you're all united and you're all pointing everything out together, what are they going to do? They don't have the numbers to do anything.
Right. And that's like I don't know if you caught it, but like how they're escalating this. And you're right about like the hotspots and stuff of Brooklyn Center. I don't know the exact technology, but I do know that they use it over in Afghanistan of the flip down computers with the facial scanners. Like that they were taking pictures of journalists' faces and stuff like that. And I saw that, and immediately one of my guys, who's also a Marine, was like, that was exactly the same kind of stuff we were using to like ID people that would hang around bomb sites in like Afghanistan. Be like, oh, well, we know you were here and you were here, and if we see you here again, like, and we were just doing that here, like a couple weeks ago. And it's like, and of course it was National Guard in full kit with magazines in their rifles, like, hi, like, whoa, like I'm sorry, but like I don't know what else to say to that. And like I think a lot of people, they always like accuse people like us of like the government's not that organized, they're not spying on everybody, they're more incompetent and blah blah blah. But then like you just like you mentioned, you talk to ex-military people and they'd be like, yeah, one operation, we gave $1 million to this guy and then like took a bunch of guns from this guy and then blame this attack on this guy, all to get like this one bomb maker who wasn't even there. And then we like, it's like, and if they're doing that over in Afghanistan, where, on the other side of the planet, what do you think they're doing here? What do you think they're doing with all these activist organizations? Who do you think that guy in all black that walks up to you at a protest and hands you a brick is? Like this is happening. Yeah. This is real.
Yeah. We used to call it chaos agents, man, right? Like your mission is to go out and sow chaos. And those guys are here. I think one of the big problems, and this is kind of where I'm a little more white pilled, is because I know a lot of this community, right? And I just know what flies and what doesn't fly in this community. And at some point, they're going to run up against a manpower problem in terms of doing these type of things here on American soil. And I'm not saying that, and I don't get me wrong here. I probably should clear that up a little bit. When I say like they're running up against a manpower problem, it's not that there's not enough people to go out there and be chaos agents. It's that a lot of the people who have the skill set and the wherewithal and the mindset to do real harm, I don't think they're going to do it here.
Yeah, I mean, I hope. I definitely do. I know, like, I still have hope for the military. I still have hope for the Guard. I definitely think the police have let us down on that, because a lot of conservatives have been like, the police would never stand for any of this, and then they did, So it's like, but also, a lot of people forget that a lot of the quote unquote good cops have been pushed out, quit, or been so horrified at what's going on they can't do it anymore. They put their badge down and start podcasts or go on the news and be like, holy, you won't believe the things I've seen. But I do have hope for the military a lot, of like kind of waking up to all of this and not going too far. But they're also desperately hiring people. They want 500 new ATF agents. They're created a whole new branch of the DHS, and it's like, why? Is things any worse now than they were before? Broadly, probably not, but they have something in motion.
Well, and that's the thing, is they have the perception and know that things are getting worse, right? The people out there are all, like we were talking about earlier, everybody's disenfranchised right now. Nobody has any confidence in any of this stuff. And if you do, you're a moron. That's at that point. Yeah. Let's print off, trillions of dollars so that we can pay these people, and recruit and hire and do all that kind of stuff. And, promise them a life of, amazing patriotism and service to this country. Right. And it's like, boy, you're going to have a really hard time in this day and age recruiting people that feel any type of allegiance to DC, right? Like it's not there anymore. And I think that the faster we have that realization, the better. And I'll tell you right now, I'm looking for the guys that are going to start calling out their commands and, requesting, not that requesting mass is going to do a ton of good, but the people who were captains and below on the officer side, and the guys who were sergeants, even up to master guns and all that fun stuff in the Marine Corps. It's like, where are you guys? Like, it's time. It's time to sit there and say, enough is enough. We've done this shit for way too long. They're doing things inside the United States now that we should have never allowed. And at the same time, you got a whole bunch of Fed boys out there that are, really, absolutely flying in the face that you think, you're serving this country for.
Yeah, especially if you're in the army, like a lot of like these CIA people and stuff like that are creating the people that are shooting at you and funding the people that are shooting at you. Like I don't understand how you could be some National Guard reservist sitting out in Afghanistan getting shot at by an AK-47 that the CIA bought the person who's shooting at it. It's like
that's something they don't talk about very often. But here's some inside. Like a lot of times, what happens in terms of USASOC and Green Beret is they get killed by their sources, right? Like they get killed by the people that they're trying to manipulate, because what happens, they start soft and then, they push them harder and harder and harder into things that they don't want to do. And they promise them money. And at some point, something happens where a life decision affects their life, maybe destroys their life, or they just get to that point and they're like, man, this isn't worth it. I can't do this kind of stuff anymore. And rather than being a punk, I'm going to give these, invading forces a piece of my mind on the way out, because you know what? Like that's kind of what happens.
Yeah, that was a lot of like what Benghazi and stuff was people that we were just giving money like a week or two before, and we're like bribing off and like working with and informing on, that were the people that attacked the compound. And it's like, oh, and you're right. Like people don't understand unless they're over there or they look into this really deeply, of just like how much of the Middle East is that of the terror group we funded is fighting the government we funded against another terror group that we used to fund but we don't fund anymore, and now we're bombing this person. And it's like, and I don't even know how much information is available to like somebody who's deployed of like all this is going on. That's something I've always wanted to ask.
It's very niche, man. And you know, I can tell you as being the intel non-commissioned officer in my platoon, right? I went and sat in intel briefings every day, and I got spoon fed whatever was going on. And then I got to see the news, and I was like, well, the news obviously doesn't know, you know, what they're doing, or, you know, better cases is they're reporting what they're told to also by these people, right? They're war correspondents and people, you know, that, you know, we're feeding me bullshit or feeding them bullshit. And it's just, I don't know, man. To see it all here now is fairly surreal for sure. Like I'm kind of done with it. Like my fun meter is pegged. I've had enough of the horse shit, and I think everybody's kind of feeling the same way. So, you know, I don't know. Maybe it's a path to unity for the rest of us.
Yeah, and I guess like that's perfect to close on, because I've brought this up to every single person I've talked to of the last week, and I think this will be right up your alley. Of September 11th in Washington D.C., we're attempting to put on a post-partisan anti-war march, and we're talking like Jimmy Dore people, we're talking like straight up communists, we're talking libertarians. I know like Scott Horton is interested. I brought it up to Dave. Like everyone's kind of like looking at this and maybe being like a moment where the anti-war movement comes back. Cause like, I assume you're only a little bit older than me, cause I'm not too young, but like we all kind of grew up when there was an anti-war movement, and there hasn't been an anti-war movement really. Like, you know, where's the Women's March style, like thousands and thousands of people marching down the street saying, stop bombing something?
Obama killed the anti-war movement, man. And, you know, that's one crown that he's going to bear for the rest of his life. And that'll be his legacy, man. That guy could have done some amazing things, and he sold out real hard. Yeah.
We're trying to kick that back up. So
I'm in.
Yeah. For me to you interested? You down with that idea?
Yeah, man.
Okay.
Now here's the thing is you got to leave your cell phones at home, because the geofencing and all that kind of stuff, we don't need a drone strike. We don't need any of that kind of stuff.
Hey, you're officially our security advisor, that you'll be there.
That's right. I'm in.
Pops open the megaphone and checks for an RFID or something.
It might be a loose follow, but I'm there. No, we'll be right in the front.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I'm so happy to hear that. And I'm glad that I've yet to talk to anybody who isn't interested, but obviously we'll see who puts up or shut up. It's a unity thing. So somebody might be like a Georgia Democrat and be like, oh, Shane Hazel's going to be there. I would rather brown kids get blown up than be seen on a stage with Shane Hazel. So
you might, yeah, that guy cusses. He's vulgar, and he speaks these languages that nobody knows, and he's, you know, into conspiracies. But yeah, man,
he's talking about a pineal gland. We can't allow our children around this man.
He's peaceful. He's peaceful. I'll give him that.
Hell yeah, brother. All right, so just tell everybody where they can find you, if you got anything planned in like the next like week or so, where they can get you at.
Yeah, man. I'm going to be up in PA this weekend, tomorrow for, I think, some good times, maybe a big announcement from the Mises Caucus up there, which will be very, very interesting. And so
the thing we all know what it is, but we're not talking about what it is. Yes.
Right. What was teased on one of the biggest programs ever. And then, yeah, man, it's radicalpod.com. You can find all my links there. You keep up with me on Twitter at Shane T. Hazel. I run my own podcast, and I have a lot of fun over there. So, you know, trying to make this liberty thing, you know, a full-time career and all that fun stuff. So any help and spreading that message and subscribing and all that fun stuff, I really appreciate it.
All right. Hell yeah, brother. And like I said, everybody go check him out. And I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for everybody who popped in. Real quick, I'm not going to tell you how old I am. So not today, FBI. But yeah, I'll catch you all later, and you know, stay safe, stay free.